You are listening to Faithless Brewing, a Magic the Gathering podcast for the Spike Rogue. Each week we design new decks for tournament play. We put our creations to the test and share our findings on the air. Our first monthly project is in the books, which means we are joined once again by Arun, Jiggywiggy, Singh, and Brian Madden from the Serum Visions Podcast to talk about what we learned from Invoke Calamity and unveil the nominees for next month's project. So crack a bottle of Blink Moth Tonic and enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the Faithless Brewing Podcast. Tonight, we're once again joined by our lovely friends from the Serum Visions gang. So, let's not give it much ado. How is it going? Shiggy, Ryan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing super well. You know, been pretty tired, pretty exhausted. Been interviewing, with two companies. One said no after 4 interviews. Pretty brutal. But I'm pretty sure this last one is going to give me the offer. And, you know, it's actually like one of the better jobs I could have hoped for. So hopefully they'll send me the offer this week. I'll just be able to accept that and then start thinking about moving to Boston. But otherwise, interviewing is super exhausting. And like, man, you know, I don't want to do it again.
Well, lovely to hear that, but let's hope it works correctly. Ryan, how are you?
You know, same old, same old. Just living the dream out here in constant isolation. I don't know what year it is. I don't know what day it is. Time is lost all meaning.
The of the weeks are to muddle together. And last, but absolutely not least, unlike last time, we're joined by our lovely CEO, better known as Caveman Online. Dane, how is it going?
Hello. It's so good to see all of your beautiful faces.
Yeah, this is super exciting. You know, it's been a while. I'd love to see more, but it's been a while since we've gotten to record together, Dan. You're looking good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's high summer here in North Carolina. I've been hitting up the beach, hitting up the pool,
Nice.
trying to get my summer colors.
I mean, we have seen photos from Dan in Mexico. We have seen photos from Dan everywhere right now. Dan in the Mexican swing.
I'm trying to work on some like Faithless Brewing thirst trap content. I have like a backlog of photos. I haven't shared them quite yet.
Nice.
Faithless Brewing OnlyFans.
Swimsuit calendar when? Let's do it. I would do a swimsuit calendar. I'm not afraid.
We need 6 photos from Zach because he's like on a cruise, and then we just split the 6 other photos among the rest of us.
Oh yeah, this is true. Zach does nothing but go to the gym now. You know, like we would have a pretty decent calendar. Not gonna lie.
Zach thirst traps when.
I'm gonna petition for Damon to be a part of this because there needs to be more beard energy in the calendar.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 6 photos from Zach, and then 6 photos. 1 from each of us, plus Damon, plus David.
Okay,
and that's just perfect. Yeah. It's the perfect split. We got it, everybody.
Just feeling like the odd man out with the facial hair here, you know?
I don't know what a facial hair is. Has anybody ever seen my arms? I don't have a single hair in my whole body. Like, literally.
It's impressive.
I know.
Yeah, seems pretty fine. I hate shaving, you know? If I didn't have to shave twice a week, I'd feel happy about it.
You don't have to shave. That's the trick. You could have a magnificent beard.
It's patchy still.
Giving a bit of context to every single listener who has been hearing us discussing our thirst traps for the past few minutes, it's the final of the first monthly project and the beginning of the second one. Dan is already in pain, Brian is already having fun, I am on that side of the show, and that's exactly what's gonna happen. We're gonna talk a bit about Invoke Calamity, discuss with the card, what sort of decks we enjoyed playing, what did we find was some good build for it, and after that we're going to jump into what's the monthly project for the next month. And we're going to start with the nominees you people have suggested so we can start with the voting.
Yeah, exactly. We got some spicy ones on the ballot. Once again, people always come through, deliver the fire suggestions. I think we have 11 cards nominated this time, and I can't wait to hear you guys' thoughts on them.
I have to say, before we do get to that, I have to say that the quality of the little blurb, the pitch that people have been giving has just gone through the roof. I feel like everybody has got their wit down. They have their pitch. You know, it's a couple sentences, punchy, high impact.
I think it's because they realize we're gonna read it word for word, so they need to make a compelling argument.
I mean, I love it.
It works well.
Yeah, they're doing our work for us. Listener-driven content.
That's what we do.
All right, Invoke Calamity. 1 red, 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 red. I was listening to some previous episodes and I realized that like when I read this card out, I miss a red pip by accident. So like I make it sound like it only costs 4. It actually costs 4 red and 1. It's just so much red.
It's so much red. It's such a weird mana cost until you have to pay it and you realize you have like a mana get recovery and a forest and you're like, I cannot cast this. I will never be able to cast this.
That happened to me yesterday. I was like really excited and I look at my lands and it's 2 breeding pools. I'm like, God damn it.
Of course, what I was describing was just a hypothesis. It was not based on experience at all. Never. Not even once.
Okay, so you need a lot of red. 1 red, 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 instant. You may cast up to 2 instant and or sorcery spells with total mana value 6 or less from your graveyard and or hand without paying their mana costs. If those spells would be put into your if those spells would be put into your graveyard, exile them instead, and exile Invoke Calamity. We've been talking about this card for the last 4 weeks or so, talked about a bunch of different concepts. Emmy and I did a whole kind of dedicated brew session. We've been getting some sweet ideas from Discord, from listeners via Twitter. Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you here first. You've been testing this card. Tell us what you have discovered.
Yeah, so I spent my time focused on land destruction, one of my longtime loves.
Don't defend it, Chi.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do.
If anybody's played sort of a Ponza style list, you'll kind of know that these lists are good in some metagames and not in others. And one of the reasons that they can be bad is because when you're one for oneing and taking lands away from your opponent, if your opponent is on, a really low to the ground deck or something like that, they may still have enough resources to get their threats out, and you're kind of spending your mana on destroying theirs, and they're still getting ahead. And so my thought was, we'll just use Invoke Calamity as a way in the late game to sort of recoup some value and kind of try and catch up after doing this 1-for-1 dance, removing creatures and removing lands. And so, I think this played out a lot like a normal sort of land destruction deck in all of my various iterations. I'm going to kind of cut to the cool things that I learned. The first was Invoke Calamity can cast adventures from the graveyard. And so in most of my lists, once I discovered this, I was playing Bone Crusher Giant, and it enabled me to play a Bone Crusher Giant to the board early if my opponent didn't have any blockers, if they were kind of dirtling around themselves, and start to apply pressure. Then, the Bone Crusher Giant could get removed, and, the opponent may play their own creature, and then you can use Invoke Calamity in the late game to recast Stomp, and get some removal or get some direct damage in. And then it goes to Exile, where you can then cast the Bone Crusher Giant again.
That's so fascinating, that interaction. I just completely missed that.
I never even thought about it. It's to that point, like, it hadn't even crossed my mind that it was a possibility.
Yeah, that's hot. Wait, Brian, a question real quick. Is the green splash for only Ren and 6 and like Cinnabar in the sideboard, was that worth it? Or would you want to add more green, or you think that, it's totally justifiable?
So I started heavier in the green, and I slowly cut back. I actually had started with a forest in the list. I had some Balagad recoveries. Those all ended up getting cut, and I slowly moved away from the green. But Ren and 6, just, it can prop up a whole deck on its own, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty whack for sure. I mean, it is, especially with Invoke Calamity requiring 4 red, I guess it does make sense that, in this kind of shell, maybe it is worth it to only splash for Ren and 6 just because you need so many red pips.
Yeah, it was the red pips, and it was wanting to be really threat light. So in my list, I was playing a single Grape Shot. I was playing a Beanstalk Giant, which I unfortunately never got to cast or play, but I was kind of hoping that would be a nice game-ending threat.
It seemed like the most fun card in the deck.
Yeah. And like being able to retrace, Lightning Bolt in the late game if I ulted the Ren and 6 seemed like a nice just kind of safety valve. It never really came to that. Most of my opponents would either concede because they just got completely destroyed on land destruction, or the Bone Crusher Giant. You're swinging in with a 4/3, you have a little bit of burn to the face. It actually ended up getting it done a couple of times. So... And, you occasionally get the Ragavan concede. Like, you hit your opponent on turn 2, you Thoughtseize them, and then they just give up.
Ragavan is so nasty. Just like every time I play with that card, I'm like, holy crap, if this survives, I'm so far ahead. It's wild.
I mean, why would we depend on Calamity when we can just go turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 Ren and 6? That's ought to win you like 30% of the games just end on turn 2.
Yeah, so I didn't really explain the full deck here. I can quickly go through what my sort of final iteration was. I was 1 Saheeli Sublime Artificer, 4 Ren and 6, 1 Beanstalk Giant, 4 Bone Crusher Giant, 4 Ragavan, 2 Anger of the Gods, 4 Boombust, 4 Cleansing Wildfire, 1 Empty the Warrens, 4 Cathartic Pyre, 4 Invoke Calamity, 4 Lightning Bolt, 23 lands. And sideboard, the big thing of note here was for Blood Moon. I kind of swapped some things around as I iterated on this list. The cards that were, pretty good, Empty the Warrens. So casting an Invoke Calamity, or casting an Empty the Warrens off of an Invoke Calamity is pretty nice because you immediately, if you stack it right, get the Storm count from the Invoke Calamity and the spell that you cast, the second spell that you cast with Invoke Calamity. The sort of things that I realized as I had been playing the various iterations is that you really want to have more looting or rummaging effects. So I have 4 Cathartic Pyre in this final iteration here, which I actually haven't played yet. But the earlier versions, I wasn't looting or rummaging very much. And what I found is that I would often have 2 spells to cast, but I didn't really have much selection. I was kind of priced into whatever was in the graveyard and whatever was in my hand. And I think that if you're going to play with Invoke Calamity, you definitely want to be aggressively putting cards in the graveyard so that you have better selection.
Yeah, you describe this as like a Gruul Ponza list, but it's really not a traditional selection of Ponza cards. Even your land destruction is Boom Bust and Cleansing Wildfire, whereas I was expecting you to have like Pillage, maybe Stone Rain.
Yeah.
Blood Moons are here on the sideboard, but like that's often a main deck thing if people are trying to accelerate into that off of Arbor Elf or Utopia Sprawl. What was the reasoning behind like this specific selection of land destruction?
So I had actually started with the Pillage and Stone Rain because I wanted to maximize the value off of Invoke Calamity. But what I found was that I wasn't ramping with enough consistency because I'm not playing Arbor Elf, Utopia Sprawl, and those sorts of things. And so I wanted the 2 mana land destruction because a turn 3 land destruction spell is usually too slow. And the other thing was that with the 4 artifact lands, so I am playing 4 of the red-green artifact lands. Cleansing Wildfire and Boom Bust end up being ramp. You can also use Boom Bust on turn 3 with a fetch land as ramp, or on turn 2 if you had a Ragavan on turn 1. And so that extra ramp was really nice for getting the Invoke Calamity out maybe a turn sooner. And I actually used the Boom Bust a couple times in the late game to destroy a Dwarven Mine and then replay it with Ren and 6 just to get some more bodies on the board. And so that's kind of why I moved away from the Pillage and the Stone Rain.
I think the card I cannot just justify I can understand Beanstalk Giant because of the synergies. I can understand the Saheeli. I just cannot understand Empty the Warrens.
That was mostly to see if, it was basically if I could cast Invoke Calamity on my opponent's end step after they had cast some spells, it was going to be a big storm turn. So even if they had one spell and I had Empty the Warrens in hand or in graveyard, could cast Invoke Calamity, you're going to get a storm count 3 there. And then if they had cast anything that turn, that's just, a bunch of bodies on board.
That's pretty hot. End of your turn, Invoke Calamity, steal your storm count, Empty the Warrens for 10, go. Who's the storm deck now?
It ended up being okay. Early game, maybe turn 3, turn 4, you can get some bodies on board as blockers, and then...
That feels almost strong enough to just build like a dedicated storm deck around. Yeah, imagine if you had just like Pyretic Ritual, a bunch of Empty the Warrens, a bunch of Invokes. You could be like a normal storm deck with Past in Flames if you want, but then you could occasionally do this line that Brian is describing, where on their end step, you just surprise them with like 12 tokens.
Yeah, what I wanted to do, but I didn't manage to find the time or energies, I wanted to take Invoke Calamity into a Pyromancer's Ascension shell, with Thought Scour, and like when that's really like Mort said, fills up the graveyard fast, because if you have an active Ascension out, one Invoke Calamity is actually 8 cast triggers. Invoke Calamity gets doubled, and each of the spells you cast off of it gets doubled.
That's nasty.
I'm just gonna throw Shig under the bus for a second and say, you just wanna play Pyromancer's Ascension in any deck.
I'm a combo player, I gravitate towards combo decks. Yes, good observation, Mort.
You gravitate around red graveyard combo decks.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is interesting now. If we could kind of more stealing some of Brian's idea, like if we can do Pyromancer's Ascension, maybe like blue-red, and then run Blood Moon also in the main deck. That's kind of like added disruption, because the initial reason to play Ascension is Luris, but we lost Luris, so now we have to be more cheap.
Just play Area of Flame. Oh, that's the combo. We just play Invoke Calamity and Area of Flame. Look at Brian's face. Just.
Okay. Like this, like red enchantment spell-based combo. I'm totally here for this.
I
And I
you
love
it.
how Blood Moon fixes your mana and turns all those pesky breeding pools into cards that can actually cast your Invoke Calamity.
My biggest problem is playing Blood Moon in a 2-color deck that wants to cast quadruple rare means A, or you are not getting your second color basics, or B, you are not casting your 5-color mana spell, your 4-red spell on turn 5.
Mort, have you heard of Navigator's Compass?
Okay. So, I'm just gonna like pull it back towards
There's
the
a
actual
limit to the
discussion.
insanity.
Before Mord takes the bait, the other thought that occurred to me when Brian had this revelation about the adventure creatures, the reason that works is because I guess Invoke Calamity doesn't target, right? So it actually works the same way that Kess Dissident Mage works with adventures. It just like checks when you're trying to put the card on the stack, it sees did it satisfy the requirements. And I guess that's the same reason why you can flashback Boom or as a 2-mana spell instead of a 6-mana spell. So it's kind of cool. And one of the concepts that we had originally kicked around was like, what if you were just like a mid-range control deck? You had Profane Tutors, you had the Black Calamity, Invoke Despair, you had the Red Calamity, Invoke Calamity, and like you just need stuff to like hold it together until you get to the mid game. And actually Bone Crusher Giant, I didn't think of that as a card that fit the strategy, but they would be perfect in that kind of deck. So like maybe you want to revisit something that's more just in the adventure mid-range space.
Just go all in, play Lucky Clover, and we're actually playing an adventure deck with Invoke Calamity.
I don't want to spoil too much, but I did suggest Lucky Clover
I
for
know.
another.
I know. I don't. I was trying to suggest Lucky Clover here, hoping you would forget about Lucky Clover later.
It's in the notes, buddy. I won't forget.
There's the Baldur's Gate has a new legendary creature, Lucky Clover, but I think that's only legacy legal.
It evades Modern, Standard, and Pioneer, so it goes to Pauper, Commander, Legacy, Vintage.
8 Lucky Clover legacy.
We're just going too deep into the Clover.
All right, so Brian, any further thoughts on the land destruction package with Invoke Calamity before we move on?
No, I think that as is the deck that I will have linked here is probably like FNM ready. It felt reasonably powerful, but I think with some work it could probably be a reasonable meta choice. Around the same times that something like a Ponza would be good, I could see this being pretty good, but plays a little bit more like a control deck and a little bit less like a Ponza deck that's going to get kind of aggro with dragons and whatnot.
Yeah, you replace Glory Bringer for the insane amount of value that Adventures plus Calamity provide.
Yep.
Also, PvE is quite nice with Adventures as well, ironically. It's a nice value play, but I think that's just going too down the line. Also, the one of Dwarven Mine is such a beautiful Brian thing to do.
Brian's signature. Every Jiggy deck has 61 cards. Every Brian card has a single Dwarven Mine.
Yeah, I guess on that same note, when I mentioned that you wanted more card selection and whatnot, I could see maybe including like a Forgotten Cave or something as an additional way to kind of dig through the deck. And I think if anybody's looking to pick this up, I would look at tuning the amount of looting effects. Like I said, I haven't tried the Cathartic Pyre. And the other thing to consider is that this is not going to do well against any big creatures. You basically have to 2-for-1 yourself if you want to remove something like a Primeval Titan. So, the goal would be to keep them off of casting anything big, but they can operate on very few lands if they're bouncing Karoo lands and things like that, so it might be tough.
All right, for our next deck, we are going over to Pioneer, and this deck comes to us from our Faithless Brewing Discord, from MMP. MMP posted a list that they had tested quite a bit some months back, and they said they had a few 4-1s and a bunch of 3-2s and 2-3s. It's a Temur Turbo Fog deck using Invoke Calamity.
What the hell?
Exactly. It was so strange that I had to test this because
it's just so out of left field. Like you start looking at the cards, and the more you go down the line, the more insane the deck list gets.
So let me be the first to say that I do not understand Turbo Fog as a concept. I fear it. I don't know what it's trying to do. I don't know why it's there. Like, I approach with great trepidation and reverence.
Let me take a quick bat at that. That Turbo Fog actually used to be pretty sick before Fire Design, when like you actually, if you could fog the game, you actually couldn't win. But now, you know, we have ways to win the game, or, you know, you can fog every turn, but if one rag event connects, you know, could be game over. It didn't used to be like that. It used to be able to, you know, just like fog every turn and win.
Turbo Fog was never a good deck, don't lie to yourself.
Moment's Peace was like such a disgusting Magic card mode. You have no idea how fucked up that card is. Like, you look at is Moment's Peace older than you actually, Mort? I'm not quite sure.
Pretty likely. But I mean, I have 4 Moment's Peace from original printing in Chinese because I used to play them. Like, my deck of choice in Pauper was Tron, which was literally a Turbo Fog deck.
Oh yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's, you know, Turbo Fog has never been like, you know, great, but it used to be like borderline fringe. Now it's like super fringe because of Fire Design. But, you know, back in the day, this was kind of a concept that was doable. And I know, who doesn't just like to stall?
No, I'm older than Moment's Peace, not by much.
You received a playset of Moment's Peace as like a baby shower gift or something like that.
I was
your birthright.
1.5 years old. I was almost 2 years old at release.
Unbelievable.
Well, what you're saying, Arun, actually answers the question for me, because I looked at this list and I did not understand why there were only 5 fogs in the deck. Because I thought Turbo Fog means you have to play like 8, 9, 10 copies of Fog Effect. But I think what you're saying is absolutely true. Like, you actually cannot win a game just by casting Fog turn after turn. You have to actually, you can use a Fog maybe once, twice, maybe 3 times, but then you have to win because the opponent has like a Planeswalker down or something, or they're just going to...
Yep.
Or a Questing Beast.
Exactly, or a Bonecrusher Giant. I mean,
Stomp.
Stomp also kills Fog, so I was like very, very nervous that this deck was just not going to work at all. But let's talk about how MMP accounted for this and how they put the deck together. So as I said, there's only 5 Fogs in the deck. 4 Fog, 1 Haze of Pollen. What you're trying to do is actually just buy time to set up this spell-based finisher combo, and that's Tasha's Hideous Laughter, which is here as a 3 of, and you're just trying to copy that once or twice. So you have Galvanic Iterations and Expansion Explosion, 2 Galvanics, 1 Expansion Explosion. You have the 3 Invoke Calamities, which can buy back a Tasha's that you already cast. And really, even though you think of Tasha's as a mill card, if you just cast the same copy of Tasha's like 3 times in a match, you probably win against a lot of decks. Not all decks, but...
If the game goes long, like, as long as they are not an aggro deck, 3 Tasha's Hideous Laughter should be enough to run them out of win cons. Like, they're gonna mill out before they can kill you. Like, against a Sorius Control, it doesn't care if they have 10 cards left. They are not going to kill you in 10 cards.
Is that true in Pioneer? I admittedly haven't played Pioneer.
It depends. So the first match I played was against the blue, white, and soul artifact deck. 2 Tashas killed them. Like, the first Tashas got 26 cards, and the second Tashas killed them. So I was impressed with like how effective it was. Now the next deck I played had like delve spells and like other expensive stuff, so it took a lot of Tashas. Temporal Trespass, which I'm playing 2 of, that's an 11 mana spell. So it's really, it varies quite a lot. So NMP is not relying entirely on Tasha's, but that's one of the ways you win. The other way you can win is with Ral Storm Conduit, who has the static text that whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you get to deal damage, and then you can set up like a Expansion Explosion infinite copy loop. There's only 1 copy of Expansion Explosion in the deck, but you can theoretically assemble this as you dig through the deck with cards like Expressive Iteration, Pieces of the Puzzle, Consider, Invoke Calamity, Narset Porter of Veils, and so forth. And the last piece of the deck is just a couple extra turn effects. I mentioned the 2 Temporal Trespass. There's 2 Part the Water Veil, which is a little awkward with Invoke Calamity. Like, you can cast that off Invoke, but it takes up all of your allotted 6 mana, and then it gets exiled. So it's like not the best, but sometimes just that extra turn is, you know, as good as a Fog or better.
But how does Awakening work? Can you, if you have a bunch of mana, can you like, is Awakening like kicker, or is it like you have to do it as you announce it? So like if you cast it off of Invoke Calamity, do you get to Awaken if you have the extra mana? I mean, I can't imagine that ever being relevant.
I believe that's an alternate cost, so you'd have to pay the full 9 in addition to your 5 for Invoke Calamity. So that did not come up in my testing.
I mean, math checks out for sure.
Oh, and I forgot to mention one of the most important cards, which is Unexpected Windfall, which is actually going to be upgraded now to the card Big Score from New Capenna. Just a nice card to copy, a nice card for assembling, a 4 and a 2 for your Invoke Calamities. Invoke Calamity was very impressive here. It's only a 3-of, so you might not think much of it when you're looking at the list, but you're going to find it with all the dig cards that I mentioned. You're going to have a plush graveyard. If you're casting Invoke, buying back Fog plus Unexpected Windfall, you're having a great turn right there, and you could do it again the next turn. It's actually a really cleverly constructed deck.
Did Tameo was that ever relevant?
Yeah, Tameo was good. I drew her a couple times. This is Tameo, Collector of Tales. She prevents opponent's discards. She has a +1 that lets you name a non-land card, and then you mill your top 4 cards, and you get to pick up any copies of the card you named. And then the -3, which is the reliable one, just rebuys a card from your graveyard, so you can rebuy a Fog or whatever you need. And that's so important because it means that casting Tameo on turn 5 with Fog mana up, you just -3, get the Fog back, and you're safe for that turn. Yeah, I would consider playing 2 Tameos, but I mean, there's a kind of an issue with the deck was a little bit land light. If you miss any land drops at all, you're basically toast.
22 is not that much. It's like the amount of lands I will play, and we all know that's a mistake.
Exactly. Yeah, so I liked the concept. I was impressed at how it played out. Most of my matches were going well, and then something went wrong and I lost. So I'm not totally sure if that's a fatal flaw with the deck or just we need to tweak some numbers out. MMP obviously has a lot more experience than I do. As I mentioned, they had a lot of 3-2s and 2-3s. So maybe I just need to learn to play it a little bit better. But I found that, if I'm not naturally hitting land drops, there's nothing worse for a Fog deck than being stuck on lands. And then you basically just can't tap out after a certain point because you need to leave your Fog mana up.
Is Howling Mine legal in Pioneer?
Not that I know of. Howling Mine. Dictate of Crufix. Is there Dictate of Crufix? Is that legal?
I think so. Maybe, I don't know, but something that's Theros, so I think so. But something those kind of effects do really well in Turbo Fog decks, because then they help you hit your land drops, and you don't really care that your opponent's drawing too many cards, because they can't attack anyways. Once again, with Planeswalkers, it's a little bit less relevant. But, in theory, these Howling Mine effects were kind of part of the Turbo Fog game plan.
I think the biggest card was the Dictate of Crufix.
Yeah, that is legal apparently, but I haven't thought about that.
I think the biggest problem is exactly what we were saying before. The Fire design is making before you could just let your opponent draw cards because no one had answers to Turbo Fog in the main deck, and now you will actually deal with stuff like Stomp in the main decks, Questing Beast, stuff that are actually gonna wreck you if you give your opponent enough draws.
Wandering Emperor, nice Turbo Fog nerd.
Yeah, blue decks, aggressive blue decks are very popular right now. People love their Izzet prowess. People love their Phoenix. Even that Solar Effect deck I mentioned, they brought in Stubborn Denials and Metallic Rebukes. It was very, very difficult to fight through aggro plus counter magic. So I don't think this deck is well positioned right now, but it is a very cool way to use both the Turbo Fog shell and the unique skills of Invoke Calamity.
Yeah, seems super good actually. Seems you had some pretty good results with it.
Well, I went 0-4, but the game is really fun.
But he had a lot of fun.
I did.
The way you described it, I thought you went at least 2-3.
No.
You were speaking so highly of it. 0-4 was not what I expected to hear.
Yeah, I know. You were talking it up. I was like, okay, maybe there's something here.
Well, I went 0-4 just picking it up, but as I said, the creator of the deck has, had much better results than me, so...
Makes sense.
Turbo Fog traditionally uses extra turn spells. Would trying to jam some extra turn spells in here help in any way? I mean,
it's got the waterfall thing.
Yeah, I have actually 2 Temporal Trespass, 2 Part the Water Veil, so that actually is part of the main component of the game plan. That said, because Temporal Trespass is a popular card in Pioneer, as soon as people see it, they know to bring in their Rest in Peace, their Unlicensed Hearse. These spell-based decks, at least in Pioneer, are vulnerable to a lot of stuff, and they have a really hard time just keeping pace with, decks that just add to the battlefield every single turn, which applies to the next deck I'm going to talk about too. So let me pivot and just mention briefly the variation that I tested. This goes back to the episode that Morton and I recorded a few weeks back, exploring just what other combos can you do with Invoke Calamity. And the one that intrigued me was the standard combo of Body of Research plus Kazul's Fury, Turbo Fling.
That's just you loving Body of Research.
I do love Body of Research.
Oh yeah, this is true. Dan does love it.
green, 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 blue, 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 sorcery. You make a giant token. You make a giant fractal, right? The fractal is as big as your library. It's a big body of research. And yeah, doesn't have trample, doesn't have any useful skills, but you can just fling it at the opponents and hope that works.
The biggest vanilla creature in Magic's history.
Exactly. So the plan or the hope is that at some point you'll just loot it away. Because Invoke Calamity can just cast it at instant speed out of your graveyard, you don't need to have a body of research cluttering up your hand. You can fill your deck with stuff like Prismari commands, big scores, Is It Charms, etc., etc. Just dump it in the graveyard at some point. When you're ready, Invoke Calamity will bring the body of research back, either to attack for lethal or more likely to untap Kazul's Fury and fling them for 40. And the surrounding core is like pretty similar to the Turbo Fog deck. You know, you're in Temur colors, mainly base red-blue, you're just trying to cast Considers and stuff like that. It's essentially Splinter Twin, it just like is a little bit slow. Like I tested this one a few matches and I was a little bit slower than my opponents were. Made me think that I needed to just like totally rethink the beginning of the curve. Like I just need to add growth spirals and whatever else we can do to accelerate. Because I think that in Pioneer, there's not like a great catch-up mechanism in the instance and sorcery space, outside of like Fog itself.
So how to do? I'm always curious about data with what if we just put a big fat homie on the battlefield, you know, like with no evasion?
No.
Can we do it?
But then we fling it. Like we get a big dork and then we...
Yeah, I mean, whatever, you know, like step 1 is get a giant dork on the battlefield, and step 2 is figure out how to win. But like, how did we get there? Did we manage to figure out step 2?
I'll say that 100% of my match wins while testing Invoke Calamity this week came from this deck. I won one match with it.
I was about to say,
I lost
so
a few
my
more.
one win...
Exactly. Yeah, I beat a Tibalt's Trickery deck. It was straight out of Explorer. Someone was mad that their Tibalt's Trickery Explorer deck got banned, so they queued up in Pioneer with Tibalt's Trickery. But yeah, I mean, this deck just like has a few problems, still working out the kinks. I'm not ready to call these decks good, but these are concepts. We're talking about concepts. We're peddling in ideas.
It's a conceptual thing.
What if instead of, I mean, it changes the list fundamentally, but kind of taking a hybrid approach where instead of looking to get the big body of research, instead we're just looking to ramp as hard as we can. So, you know, we got the growth spirals, just get as many land drops down and then do the Beanstalk Giant plan. So, you know, flood the board with land, play your Beanstalk Giant, which is hopefully going to be huge. You know, all you need is a 10-10. I say all you need, but, you know, you get your Beanstalk Giant down and then fling it.
You need two 10-10s, that's the problem. So the issue with any of these strategies is that like you can't stay alive long enough. Like you can maybe buy a couple turns with either red removal or fogs, and then you have to win. You have to just like win immediately because you're just gonna fall so far behind. Pioneer is very much about just playing creature, adding to the battlefield every turn. You're not gonna win a game with like just a large Beanstalk Giant. The same reason that I didn't like the Crackling Drakes that David wanted to put Crackling Drakes in the deck. He was like, you know, Crackling Drake is all you need, but actually, just given how far behind you are casting these spells, you need a lot more than Crackling Drake. You just need to instantly kill them. You need Splinter Twin.
Well, and the Crackling Drake's probably a better Beanstalk Giant than Beanstalk Giant, because I was thinking you got a hit in with the Beanstalk Giant, then you fling it. You know, that's why you only need the 10, but the Crackling Drake's probably going to get there a little bit easier. It doesn't rely on lands, and it has evasion, so if the Crackling Drake can't get there, then the Beanstalk Giant's probably just dead in the water.
But what about the flavor win of flinging the giant, though?
Moral victory, perhaps, yeah.
You're throwing it from like up the beanstalk, like you're throwing it like as it collapses to its dead on the floor, like straight up from the Fable.
All right, so I did not have much success, but maybe we should pivot here to a deck that showed a lot more promise, and for this we're going back to Modern. So Arun, Emmy, you guys are both working on one of our most promising Invoke shells, namely with Collected Conjuring.
Oh, yeah, well, this is mostly all Mord's doing. I just kind of bandwagged and stole it at the end because, you know, I wanted to at least have some skin in the game. I didn't get to test and play as much Magic as I wanted to, you know, just super tired and busy. And it's interesting, you know, like during all these interviews and stuff, I've just been so mentally drained. It's like, don't really have like the want to play Magic. You know, it's like my brain is full. Like, you know, my brain is exercise. We do not need to give it more exercise. Which was, you know, kind of just food for thought for me at least. But yeah, I mean, this is, you know, it's like, hey, do you want to play Invoke Calamity and Collected Conjuring in the same deck? The answer is for sure. So here, I'll let Mord kind of go over it, and then I'll probably make comments here and there with my experience.
This deck was the first one I discussed and then I talked about it during the next episodes, which is the deck based around all sorceries, and its main plan is via Collected Conjuring or Invoke Calamity, get Crushing Footfalls, Flame Sash, Anger of the Gods. So a lot of removal and pretty good Rhinos into play by cheating on the suspend mechanic. And the deck worked fairly well actually. It had two huge issues. First and foremost, saying that the Teferi is devastating for your deck is an understatement. I got a screenshot of me with I had 6 mana in play, 2 Collected Conjuring, 2 Invoke Calamities, and my opponent had a Teferi in play. So,
oh my god.
a Teferi Time Raveler. So I just couldn't play.
So Teferi Static says you just cannot cast anything off Collected Conjuring, you cannot cast anything off Invoke Calamity.
I just got shut down into 0. And I couldn't even suspend my Rhinos because Teferi. So the deck is dead code to 2 things. Teferi, because everything is sorceries, that wants you play unfairly. And Ragavan, because everything is sorceries. And people realize that after game 1. And more importantly, even if they don't realize and just dash it, my opponent went through one Ragavan, I couldn't kill it, and they got a See the Truth. My opponent exiled a See the Truth with the Ragavan. And I was this close to just conceding and dropping MTG.
Oh wow, yeah, honestly, Ragavan, just like, some of those turn 1s are just so, like turn 1 Ragavan hits Mox Amber, I'm just like, is it even worth playing? Honestly, like, why am I doing this?
I think the worst one I have ever had was I think the most usual one is Ragavan hit on top deck mode. Either on top deck mode, get an expressive iteration, or on turn 2, get a Renan 6. When Izzet Murktide gets a Renan 6 on turn 2, you just don't want to keep living.
Yeah, and I just, I had a Vindicate on my turn 1 when my turn 1 Nev opponent went turn 1 Utopia Sprawl, and Ragavan hits a Vindicate. It's like, well, this game is over.
See the Truth is not for the faint of heart. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can watch Emmy cast See the Truth when his opponent controls Dalthy Voidwalker. And it does not work out the way that you want. They just get to free cast Ancestral Recall off of their Voidwalker.
That was not a good idea.
Alright, so more about this deck, Mord. What did you think, especially, how was Collected Conjuring?
So I think in all my testing, the deck went like 8-7, something like that. Like barely over 50-50. My last league went 2-3 because I lost all my games to the Teferi or Ragavan. Like literally, my 6 losses because all my matches ended like 2-1 were to Teferi or Ragavan.
And math checks out, I lost 2 matches to Ragavan.
When the deck does what it wants to do, it's actually quite good. Like the games you just go turn 3 Enigmatic Incarnation, you feel like you're doing actually a really powerful thing. The problem is it's so easy to interact with what you're doing that it gets a bit clunky pretty easily. And I think that's the biggest issue.
I noticed a lot of tension with playing, when you put Invoke Calamity and Collected Conjurings in your deck to try and optimize them, you get in this strange tension where, like, just like, what are your early plays? Like, you still, sadly, you need interaction in Modern. And, just so you have some kind of pretty weak removal over here, and then just, like, there's no... You don't even get to put down cool bodies to kind of block Ragavan, maybe some, like, Arboreal Grazer or something of the sort, or just, but we don't really get to play those because then those mess with our Collected Conjuring and Invoke Calamity stuff. I definitely notice tension with that. And then, yeah, huge, Teferi Time Raveler. Like, what's your... I didn't see anything in this list that could actually kill a Teferi.
So, in my actual gameplay, in the league I played, I actually changed the Flame Sash for Firebolts. So I had Strangle plus Firebolt, which meant I could chew for one myself to get rid of a Teferi, but still, it was really bad.
Yeah, you do have options at 1 mana. Flame Slash, Strangle, forgot about Firebolts. Hard Evidence would be an option, maybe. I don't know, like how far you're willing to go to stop the early attackers, but none of this stuff solves Teferi. Teferi is... I was wondering if you should just like cut the pillages for more cheap interaction.
Yeah, Pillage was definitely a little, like one of the cards I was least excited to hit.
I mean, I actually quite liked Pillage because it first gave me an answer to a lot of stuff like Chalice of the Void. Like I faced a lot of Chalice on 0 and such.
Oh, wow.
And also was pretty good, like against the control decks, the turn 3 Pillage into turn 4, maybe Pillage into... Like, Pillage is a pretty good way to wait out counter spells.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
I'm curious how the Crashing Footfalls played out. I feel like this is something that I trap myself with all the time. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to throw in some Crashing Footfalls in this deck that, can cast it. And... like I end up putting it in my Bolas' Citadel decks a lot, and I feel like it's just, I draw 3 of them in my opening hand without fail. It's like I'm all down to 3, and it's 3 Crashing Footfalls every time.
Then you just bottomed the three. Why are you keeping those? You just bottom them, Brian. You got the London Mole now.
I'm being a little hyperbolic, but I felt like I got stuck with them a lot.
My footfalls are actually, I think, let me know, Chig, if you think the same thing. They might have been like the best cards in their deck.
Yeah. I wanted to say I was like really impressed with them. Just, it seems clunky, but like, you've got some minor disruption and like, sometimes you're just able to like turn 4, Collected Conjuring into 2 Rhinos. Your next turn, end of their turn, you get to Invoke Calamity, do cast another Rhinos and maybe like some kind of small land destruction spell, whatever. It was, like Rhinos is a good deck, like it's one of the better decks in Modern. Every time I play against it, even though I have like Engineered Explosives, sometimes I have even Teferi and, they can still just like Otawara, end of turn Otawara into, just like 2/4/4 Rhinos untap, just like more Rhinos and just like, damn, they're big. Like 16 power trample is really a lot.
Like a lot of the time your plan just goes like turn 1 suspend, turn 2 play any crappy removal into turn 3 Collected Conjuring that hits like Rhinos plus, sometimes you go literally turn 3 Rhinos plus Pillage, and the tempo swing in that play, like 4 mana 8/8 that destroys a land, it's just unreasonable powerful. Especially when you can just follow it up next turn with a Calamity.
Yeah, and don't forget that Invoke Calamity can cast from your hand, so if you have Rhinos that you drew at a later turn, that's not a complete disaster.
Again, it all returns to the biggest problem being the Teferi devastating you. You are not getting those Rhinos out of your hand via any method if they have a Teferi.
So on the subject of this deck, we had a question that came in via Twitter from Ben McKinnon-Duggins, and he said that based on our discussions of Calamity earlier, he felt like we were not giving proper consideration to Finale of Promise. That was very interesting to me. So Finale of Promise, X red, you get to recast up to 1 instant and up to 1 sorcery from your graveyard. Works very nicely with Crashing Footfalls, with Ancestral Vision. I think once you put Finale of Promise into your Collected Conjuring deck, you're very much incentivized to also play Ancestral Vision. So you have more stuff in the graveyard for Finale to hit. On the other hand, I don't think you're going to have much room for instants, so you're not going to get a lot out of Finale.
Yeah, I'm kind of in there. I don't see why Finale would even be, like, kind of good in this deck, right? Ideally, you need, like, Finale for 3 mana, and you need to hit a 1 mana instant, and then your Footfalls or your Ancestral Visions that already have to be in the yard somehow. Now, Invoke Calamity does the same thing with having to jump through less hoops. Like what you like, I just like what gonna Invoke Calamity and cast Promise, like Finale of Promise or whatever, and then just like things get really weird. I'm pretty skeptical. I don't quite, in my brain, I don't see how you can make how that leap is made and saying, these 2 cards have great synergy.
I mean, the second part of the tweet was the one I grabbed the most, which is Expressive Iteration. So I went ahead and grabbed the list I was playing, and when I did the Fireballs, I think I swapped 2 Theaters for 2 Expressive Iteration, and it wasn't that much better, because you don't have enough tips, like, with Expressive Iteration, you rely on having enough cheap spells you can actually exploit the fact that the one you're exiling is irrelevant. In here, unless my opponent had a cheap creature and I actually hit a 1 mana removal, which I don't have that many, it was mostly the same card as See the Truth. It wasn't that much different in most scenarios.
Didn't someone in our Discord, they had a blue-red version that played as Foretold, I believe, and just like they had kind of the as Foretold package too, and like with Striker, because I think wondering like if going with this shell, it might just be the strongest turns, like you said, more were like turn 3 Collected Conjuring into like next Invoke Calamity, just kind of go nuts like that. Maybe adding some Strike It Riches, and like then maybe like kind of going with what the other person on the Discord, the Strike It Riches, and then the As Foretold that gives you the option. You can turn 2 As Foretold into Rhinos, which is really, and then your As Foretold just starts clicking up, or like this way even just it gives you like Strike It Rich on turn 1 to get you a turn 3, gets you to your turn 3 Collected Conjuring, which then maybe you get into like Rhinos into something else. Yeah, Brian.
I know it's different deck, but I started with Strike It Rich in my initial lists, and I found that in like 95% of cases, Striker Rich was better served as just being a Ragavan.
Ragavan is always the best card.
Yeah, this should probably play 4 Ragavans, honestly. Like, why not? Who cares? Nothing matters.
Why are you not playing? That's the bigger question, right? Why are you not playing for Ragavans?
Yeah, but the thing also with Strike It Rich is it's just such a bad card. Like, anytime that's not turn 1, that if you want to make Strike It Rich work in your deck, you need to find a way to maximize the busted things. So, you know, like, Strike It Rich is bad, but Strike It Rich enabling turn 2 as Foretold into Rhinos is like, that's really powerful. You know, like, now all of a sudden, even if you're facing Tron, now you do that turn 1 on the play, like, turn 1 on the play against Tron, you know, their Tron is going to be down to 4 damage before they finally have their Tron and doing things. Like, you know, and that's just relatively simple. So I think if you want to do it, you know, you need to maximize those kind of like cheaty, like, oh, you know, like super strong plays. Otherwise, I agree, Strike It Rich is total garbage. But if you can kind of try and maximize those plays, I think it could be quite powerful.
Yeah, I'm remembering now. I think that was Kilgore Trout who had that list, and he said that the Strike It Rich was like the best card since Simian Spirit Guide for specifically trying to get the Turbo As Foretold deck, which is pretty cool. I mean, As Foretold has kind of fallen out of the metagame. It does a lot of interesting things, and is operating in the same space as Finale of Promise. I think it's a little more versatile. Obviously, it does not count towards your Collected Conjuring, so Finale is better in that specific respect. But beyond that, I think I lean towards As Foretold.
I think it's also worth considering Electrodominance if you're going to consider Finale, because if you're casting with any X value greater than 0, you're at least getting some damage in there as well. It can't cast out of the graveyard, which is a bit of a bummer. But that was a card that always impressed me when I played with it. If you have the mana to do things other than X equals 0, you know, that extra little bit of damage is just really handy.
It does also turn, you know, like now, and if you're one of those in your graveyard, then your Invoke Calamity can now get 0 free CMC things out of your hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, at this point, it feels like it's, you know, like almost like the rule of 16 now, where you have just like these 16 cards that are all, you know, in very similar spaces. And I don't think we need all 16 because they all need all the cards to work.
It's probably a meta call. You know, if you're heavier on creature decks in the meta, maybe the Electrodominance makes more sense as a way to, you know, just ping down, you know, Ragavans and things like that. If you're heavier on discard decks or something, maybe you want the Finale because you know that more of your cards going to end up in the graveyard. So
I do love
I would say that your Collected Conjuring deck has room for like maybe 4 more non-sorceries, but that's it. Like, once you go beyond that, you just can't do any more. So if Electrodominance is that card, if As Foretold is that card, I mean, these are things to test. But that being said, you know, it's been an interesting month with Invoke Calamity. I think it was a great choice. Happy to see that it won. Let's sort of gather our final thoughts on, like, what do we think about what Invoke Calamity brings to the table? What are the most promising things we learned or things to avoid?
So I'm going to start by saying, for the first time, like, everyone knows I'm the first to say just screw it played in a 5-color deck. And this is the first time that has proven impossible because 4 pips seems to be my limit, right? Like, if this card was like triple colorless double red, I think the power of this card gets a lot bigger when you can just play it in piles that also have access to Thoughtseize, that you can play like a lot of different plans together. Here you're really limited to a mostly red deck that is allowed to soft splash in other colors. And that mostly red deck that, unless it's mono red, cannot play Blood Moon, because it comes to play red, which is a lot of red.
Yeah, and when Mord says mostly mono red, he's serious about that. Like, you should not have more than 2 lands in your deck that do not produce red.
I had problem with only 2 non-red. Yeah, it's to that extreme, which is insane because it almost seems like an exaggeration when you think about it, but it's not. The deck is that color intensive.
Well, and I think that's really a statement because, you know, Indomitable Creativity decks are 3 red pips and is played in a 4-color deck. It's that extra pip will really get you.
I mean, that's one of the directions that I think would be interesting to explore, like the overlap between the Indomitable Creativity mana base in Modern. Like, that already supports Invoke Calamity, right? They only play 2 non-red lands in the entire deck. So you could do that. You know, we talked about this Velomachus concept, where as soon as you get Velomachus in play, you know, Invoke Calamity can rebuy your Time Warps, etc., etc. That could be good. But yeah, do not play a bunch of breeding pools and stuff. We've learned that.
Please
lesson.
don't do so. Please, from the bottom of my heart, don't play breeding pool in your Invoke Calamity deck. You're gonna regret that so much without noticing.
Let us make the mistakes.
Let us make the mistake so you don't have to.
So my big takeaway, which came mainly from playing Pioneer, was that the spell-based decks, they have a hard time controlling the battlefield. Like, Phoenix can do it because they're playing so many one red removal spells, but I mean, decks are built to just come out the gates on you. They're built to have cheap stack interaction. Almost all the hate cards are going to hurt a spell-based deck. Like, the spell-based deck tries to catch up by having a plush graveyard or by casting a bunch of spells in a turn, and there's a lot of cards already played in Pioneer that fight on all those axes. I found that I wasn't like able to just turn the game around, like lacking a hard sweeper in red specifically, or lacking a card like Crashing Footfalls to just add a bunch of stuff to the battlefield.
Yep.
I do think that maybe Invoke Calamity is like not as well set up in Pioneer as it is in Modern.
Okay, yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because I was going to say, like, my big takeaways are, like, the best Invoke Calamities were flashing back powerful cards, right? Just like when you get to maybe even, like, sometimes you get 4 Rhinos, it's just how it works out, or you get, like, 2 Rhinos, and then you draw 3 cards, like, that's when you can't just paying 5 mana, you're like, wow, like, this isn't, like, this card I would pay 5 mana for happily, but, like, if you don't have those kind of things, if you, also, sometimes just depending how the game works, like, you do, I think Mort said it just like a little bit before, like you need to fill your graveyard for these cards, like if you don't have things in your graveyard, you cannot flash this thing back, or you don't really get as much value out of it. So I think definitely, you want to be doing powerful things that will end the game in 1 or 2 turns, or at least put you in a position where you can't lose. Because, I think, but then again, that's also like any 5 mana card in Modern, like when your blue-white opponent resolves it to Fairy Hero, you've got like 2 turns to deal with it, or you're actually just going to lose.
I mean, we can picture that Navy is unplayable as a 5-mana 6/6 that draws 3 or 4.
Or 10.
3 or 4. I'm not going down that slippery slope. And picture that, and paying Wooburg, it's not that different from paying red. I think we can all agree on that. Like, the color requirement is practically the same. So your 5-mana spell has to do something pretty impressive when you know Navy is not gonna see play, and you're actually hoping this to see play.
Yeah. This is going to come across as probably a little bit disparaging here, but I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings. This just feels like a classic Jund card to me.
Oh, no.
It's,
No.
It's just just a little bit of extra value, and like you had to have been doing something earlier in the game that necessitates you to recoup that value, and it feels like the type of card that has its moments where it can be powerful, but oftentimes the format's like too fast or too efficient, and your plan of 1 for 1 until the late game when you can recoup some of that value just isn't gonna quite get there.
I will say, I like that it's an instant. If this was a sorcery, it would be like 0.
Yeah. At Sorcery Speed, we wouldn't be having this chat. I would have played 2 deck lists, say this is unplayable, and stop it. Instant Speed is where it gets fun.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I'm going to probably keep this in my back pocket still. And, I think one day when I get bored or, confident, whatever comes first, I do want to try and mess with an Ascension deck. And, I just want to get them 8 triggers, man. Just get those 8 triggers.
Give me all those triggers. Give me the triggers.
Even if I have to flash back, like 2 Thought Scours and like whatever, like I'll flash back the garbage cards, whatever. It's 8 spells.
The man said it. Cannot argue with that.
The dream is not dead, hope is not lost, but our time with Invoke Calamity must come to an end because it's time to choose a new card for next month. So that's going to do it for Project Invoke Calamity. We are going to take a short break. When we come back, we will unveil the nominees for next month's project. Stick around.
All right, welcome back, and we're going to dive into our nominees for this next month's project. First up, we have Efreet Flamepainter. This was nominated by Ara Mesor. It is 3 and a red for a creature, Efreet Shaman. It has double strike and reads, whenever Efreet Flamepainter deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. And it is a 1/4. Ara writes, listen, I know you literally just did a Spellslinger type card with similar mechanics, but I truly love this card and used to abuse it in Standard in combination with cards like Magma Opus, Boon of the Wishgiver, Creative Outburst, and other powerful instants and sorceries that cycle or discard for value. The major issue with it that I've found is that the earliest I can generally cast it is turn 3, and connecting it is difficult without something like Access Tunnel or maybe Tetsuku Umezawa from Dominaria. Might combo well with cards like Fable, Pyromancer, and Galvanic Iteration. Definitely feels like a card that should be busted insane, but is in reality pretty difficult to properly use. Hoping y'all can use your magic on it.
Man, Efreet Flamepainter, what a card. This card is so spicy. So you gotta put spells in the graveyard, but if you ever connect, it's double strike, so you get to cast 2 things out of the graveyard for free.
It's a double like, this card is so close on so many axes, right? Like, the double strike makes it interesting. The fact it has 4 toughness makes it interesting. Like, you just look at the cost and are like, oh no. And then you look at the upsides and are like, oh maybe? Oh, maybe?
Yeah, I have, I was in my first, I see this, I'm just like, 4 mana for a 1/4, and then you need to make it connect and also be putting, there's like a lot of circumstances that, it asks, a lot of hoops that ask you to jump through, which seem, very absurd, almost possible in Modern, but, maybe Pioneer it's possible, but, the payoff is huge, like double strike and, like casting 2 free things that are huge.
So if you were listening very, very carefully, when we did our episode on Hinata Dawncrowned, David actually proposed a deck that had 4 Efreet Flamepainters in it. And the combo was with the card Mindlink Mech from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. It's just the perfect vehicle to pair with Efreet Flamepainter and all kinds of cards. Like, there's a handful of creatures that do something really busted, but they can never actually get through for combat damage, or they have a very small body. And Mindlink Mech is just perfect. It gives the Efreet Flamepainter haste, it deals 8 damage, it casts 2 spells. It's just the perfect pairing.
So a quick question. So let's say if the card you want to flashback is Thought Scour. So you attack, the first strike happens, you flashback the Thought Scour, and that resolves, then you can get your second damage trigger, and you can flashback something that was milled with a Thought Scour possibly, or something of the sort.
Like, you don't target as it's 2 different iterations of damage, you just target the first one when you hit the first strike, and then you target the second one when you hit the second one. You don't have to do anything else. It also allows you, for example, that sort of play, like, I don't know, you have your graveyard full, first strike triggers, you target a Magma Opus, and your opponent just goes like, okay, crack my Relic of Progenitus, and you go, okay, before normal damage, cycle this, Boon of the Bushwigger, draw 4 cards. Like, it has that sort of thing also in its favor, where you can, between the 2 triggers, there's the point where you can do practically anything you want.
Yeah, this card is like probably a lot better than I think it is, and it would be very cool to explore it.
You'd have to, real quick, you'd have to let the first trigger resolve. You'd have to let the first Progenitus trigger resolve.
Yeah.
And then, because it targets still, but then you still get that second flashback.
Yeah, in this scenario, yeah.
That being said, there are 10 other cards on the ballot, so we must move on. The next card up is Jinnie Fey, Jetmir's second.
Oh, I love this one.
Nominated by Kilgore Trout 503, our friend Jason. He says, Jinnie Fey is coming fresh off its first 5-0 in Modern. Oh my gosh. Okay, what is this card? Jinnie Fey, Jetmir's second. 3/3 for green, red-green hybrid, green-white hybrid. So it's the Naya legendary, I don't know what they call these.
These are like the lieutenants. These are the second in command.
Oh, the capos. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the Cabaretti capo. It's an elf druid. If you would create 1 or more tokens, you may instead create that many 2/2 green cat creature tokens with haste, or that many 3/1 green dog creature tokens with vigilance. Boy, okay.
That's hot as hell.
Yeah, that card
Holy
is
cow.
actually interesting. Like, the versatility in 3/1 vigilances against 2/2 hastes. Like, the body itself is really medium. Like, a 3-mana 3/3 is, I want to say, borderline unplayable when I actually mean unplayable. But the first spell you play, like, a Raise the Alarm, making 6 power, is like, I mean, insane.
So Kilgore writes, Yo dog, I heard you like tokens, so I made your tokens into other tokens. Jinnie Fey has been in its first 5-0 league dump this week, shoutouts to Temur and Moon, and I suspect it is not the last. Playable in Gruul or Naya, with cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria, what's not to love?
I have to say I vote for this card purely on the Ghostbusters reference. Thank you, Jason, for that.
You just got bought with that. You didn't take much levels.
Yeah.
I mean, this card is it's sick.
Yeah.
I love it.
Think of Academy Manufactor and this thing together or not together. So I think the really important aspect of this that I just want to point out is that this says any token. So this works with food, this works with treasures.
Yep.
And so it makes something like a Strike It Rich in the late game into an actual threat. It makes the flashback on Strike It Rich actually like possibly valuable. I don't know that you want to pay 3 mana for a 2/2 or a 3/1, but
it's a lot better than a treasure.
Yep, exactly.
Gilded Goose, hello. Now Gilded Goose is playable again.
Gingerbread Cabin, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
So who would have said the Dwarven Mind guy would suggest Gingerbread Cabin almost immediately?
Oh hey, I mean Dwarven Mind's a token.
Yeah, oh yeah.
By the way, I just tracked down this 5-0 list that Kilgore referenced. It is a wild list. It's 3 Jinnie Fey, 4 Venerated Loxodon, and just like a bunch of token makers. Verdant Command, Raise the Alarm, Gather the Townsfolk, Lingering Souls, Spectral Procession, Intangible Virtue, Legion's Landing, 5-0 in Modern. Oh my gosh.
Legion's Landing is like white mana ramp, you know? It's always, that card's always been on my list of, you know, technically it is white mana ramp.
I think that leg list is so far away from what you want to be doing. Like, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's bad.
I'm just saying I'm totally gonna throw Mox Amber in this list and see if we can get there, you know? Legends.
I mean, Legion's Landing is an amazing card, and I am in love with Verdant Command. And I have been looking for an excuse to play Verdant Command for so long.
Yes, I'm right there too. I think Verdant Command might actually be a little undervalued. Like 2 mana for, like, sure they come to play tap, but it's kind of like cute, interesting stuff. There's also the Squirrel from Modern Horizons 2 that then also, like, when you create tokens, you get Squirrel tokens too.
Shadowfang, that, and make them removals.
Yeah, but I mean, even though you just like, so you get your 2 tokens that then become dogs, and you get like 2 more squirrels that also become dogs or cats, and now you're just like doubling the token, double. Let Magic Online do the math for you.
Alright, so Jinnie Fey Jetmir's second is our second nominee, but we have 9 more to go. What is our next card?
So, next card, we're going with a spicy one. We're going for a moderate one. We have Moderation. 3 mana, a white, a blue, and any color for an enchantment that reads, you can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. Whenever you cast a spell, draw a card. Benjamin writes, surely a 2-for-1 on every spell must be broken. We lose some tempo, but if we can find some way to mitigate the damage caused to our deck by that first line of text, the card seems faster in half to me. I need this to win so I can either giggle gleefully as it buries the opponents on our testing team in card advantage, or resign it to my bulk pin, never to be seen or heard from again. At present, I simply cannot get this out of my mind. Please, Faithless Brewers, free me from my enduring agony and subsequent torment. I can no longer sleep. I'm like more now, thoroughly consumed by madness. This card haunts me forever, forever. The fact that he's saying that after I pull an all-nighter to playing the challenge, it's like a personal attack at the same time.
So this is like a rare morning recording for us, but like morning implies that, you know, you had a good night's sleep and went to bed. Mord is just like, oh, if it's the morning recording, I'll just stay up all night, join the Modern Challenge. He's 7-0 right now. He's double queuing this podcast and the Modern Challenge.
Yeah, we just accept Mord as a different type of human.
I love Moderation. And the fact is, I never actually considered how to build Moderation, right? Like, sometimes you love a card and you just say, I would love to play this, but never actually get some deep thought into it. And then people started mentioning cards like Timeless Dragon, and I asked Dan for what else, and he said, we have the new turtle, and I'm like, So an enchantment recently for my Solitudes and every single spell. Everything is, even Solitudes because a 1-for-1, and that's insane. A 0 mana 1-for-1s. I think a 0 mana 1-for-1 is better than a 2 mana 2-for-1. And that's what is insane about this card. Subtlety, Force of Negation, Solitude, everything becomes automatically a 1-for-1 every single time.
Yeah, there's a lot of free spells now too. I mean, this is, you know, like, yeah, I'm intrigued. And also, like, you know, if you can, the big thing is, you know, it's kind of unlikely that your opponents, like, they can't cast too many spells. So, you know, if you can play 1 spell in your turn, then you can always play the 1 spell in the opponent's turn. I feel that might be just a key to Moderation. Like, you have to get every trigger you can out of it.
Not only that, I think even if you're playing the free spells to remain on tempo, you need things to do with your mana. And stuff like Timeless Dragon is perfect, right? Like a 4 mana 4/4 that then you can just hold up Subtlety. That's perfect.
Yeah, it works great with the channel mechanic. So Colossal Sky Turtle is the card that Emmy lovingly calls the Flirtle. Boseiju, Otawara, you can do all of these as well. Yeah, we were looking at Flash a couple weeks ago, and I was like very interested in this Moderation deck list that Matt Camo, Bomac Courier, had 5-0'd with like during the first week of MH2, and it was like, yeah, what if I just slam my Moderation on turn 3 and immediately cast Subtlety or Solitude on the opponent's turn? Like, I feel like this card might actually be great. We just kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's designed by Sam Black, and Sam Black is, you know, like one of the geniuses one of the Magic geniuses of our time in terms of how well he understands actual concepts in the game. And, you know, thank him for saving Modern Horizons 2. It could have been you should have seen the shit that they wanted to do. It's mind-boggling.
He stopped Caracas. And he does Caracas and one
Doomsday.
more. And Doomsday, exactly. He saved us from ourselves. So yeah, with Mother...
And he also called companions. Like, he knew, he's just like, these are way too busted. They're like, we're gonna do it anyways. And he's like, these are too busted. And he's like, they're like, do it anyways. And then they're too busted. What a surprise.
Maybe you play a Jeskai moderation deck with some Pyromancer Ascension. Can I interest you in that there, Dr. Combo?
No, because, like, how are we going to trigger our Ascension? What's the point of only, like, cast a spell and we draw a card, then, I want to cast a billion spells in a turn. That's the whole point, is to take all the game actions. This card limits my own game actions, Brian. No thank you.
It is a really interesting drawback. One spell a turn.
Brian, tell us what you really want to do with this. Now you can mention it. It's a time for a lucky.
Lucky Clover. I'm just trying to think, like, how do we kind of skirt the limitation of one spell per turn? And so my immediate thought was copies that aren't cast, and there are a few of those, like Pyromancer Ascension or Lucky Clover.
There's also things like finding a creative way to bounce it to your hand, like at the end of your opponent's turn, or like you can bounce it with your own Teferi, Time Raveler. You can like channel Odawara end of turn or something. Just like channel your Sky Turtle, bounce it at the end of their turn. Like maybe Solitude, Ephemerate, and then just like recast it. Lots of food for thought like this. But I think that's also another option, is to just find a good way to get rid of it at your opponent's EOT.
Yeah, it's like Urian plus Fire Zone Invention all over again. There's a lot of similar tech that we could use for moderation.
I know it sounds absolutely insane, and it probably is, but if we could give it to our opponent on their turn with like a Narset out, just shut them down. Here, you take this, I'll take it back on my turn.
Moderation for thee, not for me.
I think the card that's extremely important is the Fairy Time Raveler. So eventually you will reach a moment where moderation has gave you enough card advantage that now you don't need more card advantage.
That's actually a really good
just
point
having
too.
a Teferi eventually just gonna, bounce this to hand and pitch it to a Solitude. Goodbye, you have done enough. My only fear with moderation is how you're gonna face the combo decks and such, where you actually need multiple spells on a turn. But I think in those games you just sideboard into a regular Azorius control, which should be favored, because you're playing a lot of free interaction.
You could also just like load it up on, like deafening silence and those sorts of effects. So now you have you've broken the symmetry by forcing your opponent into your own symmetry.
Okay, I like that.
All right, next card up is Getaway Car. Brian, tell us about the Getaway Car.
The Getaway Getaway Car is 3 generic mana for an artifact vehicle. It has haste. Whenever Getaway Car attacks or blocks, return up to 1 target creature that crewed it this turn to its owner's hand. It has a crew cost of 1, and it is a 4/3. This was nominated by Judge Rob, and Judge Rob writes, "This is an aggressive haste vehicle that does a weird thing where it rebuys ETBs. I found a few easy interactions with Thraben Inspector and Voldaren Epicure, but there are likely some weird and cool things you can do otherwise while also attacking for 4. And this is a spicy one. I definitely, I don't know, this is definitely something that kind of stumps me at first blush. My gut reaction says this is a friend of Memnite. It doesn't buy you an ETB, but it means that you're getting in with a Memnite every turn. You're basically getting a free crew. And since this has haste, you can cast Memnite on the same turn, get in with your crew and attack with the Getaway Car, bounce it back. You can recast the Memnite.
I mean, it's a May. You could just not bounce whatever else you're tapping for it.
It's not a May. It says return, up to 1. So that's 0. You're right.
Here, hold on. I know. Brian is leaving out the crucial detail that we have a...
Impact Tremors.
No, what's the Mirren thing? Brian has Mirren Besieged active.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, is maybe you don't play the ETB on the creature itself. Because I don't really want to be... I mean, maybe I do want to be casting an ETB creature every turn, but in my mind, I want to be doing something like... I want to get free value out of this. And so the Memnite can turn into value other ways. Maybe it's a Sai, maybe it's the Mirrodin Besieged. Getting the repeat cast triggers from a Saheeli or something like that could be valuable.
Yeah, I agree with Brian. Like, the fact that this is an optional bounce, right? So you only do it if you have some way to profit off of bouncing your thing. And Judge Rob has the obvious choices. Voldaren Epicure, Thraben Inspector. We should definitely try those, but not every creature with an ETB is going to be cheap, right? Memnite is the cheapest thing. So if you just find some way to pay yourself off from having an artifact to cast every turn, like this is actually like a very, very efficient combo. Memnite and Getaway Car both pressure the opponent's life in a meaningful way. So I don't know. Like, this is a very strange vehicle.
Song of Creation aggro.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I mean, there's also the fact that crew 1 means at least 1, right? So
Yeah.
in the late game, you can start bouncing literally anything you want, as long as it's not Wall of Omens. I mean, yeah, you can get back Wall of Omens as long as you have another creature.
Right, you need a crew with wall plus something else that you can choose to bounce the wall.
The loophole.
There's like inherent tension, like how many decks that want to be bouncing a 3-bin Inspector also want a 4/3 haste. So you have to solve that question. And
Yep.
that's why I think Mem Knight is actually more on the right track
Okay.
than even 3-bin Inspector is.
Yeah, my biggest problem with this deck is I think you can actually find a good shell for it, but you can find one good shell for it. Like, Getaway card has clearly one thing. It's an aggressive card that allows you to get ETB values. It falls in the sort of Cunning Knight Ponder shenanigans. What else can you do?
Alright, our next card up. I'm going to turn this one over to Arun because this card has the same haircut that Arun has.
Oh,
Ashaya!
yeah. Yeah, Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. 3 green, legendary creature elemental. We love legendary creatures because they enable Mox Amber. 5 CMC is a lot though. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild's power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. Non-token creatures you control are forest land in addition to their other types. So, a lot on this card. Chrism23 writes, I'm exploring what good game mechanics are hard to disrupt. And Landfall came to mind since you can't counter playing lands or easily destroy lands. A very good point. Ashaya works insanely well with cards like Lotus Cobra and Tireless Provisioner. Alright, you have my attention. I love Lotus Cobra. For massive mana ramping.
I thought you were gonna say La Provisioner.
I mean, Provisioner's cool, but Lotus Cobra's hot. After that, your options are endless, but I really like this engine card, which would work equally well with Creature Swarm decks. Yeah, this card is really sickos. It's, my brain is too small for this. I cannot comprehend. But I know, wasn't this at one point used in the initial versions of the Tameshi Bloom deck with Recruiter?
Yeah, it was proposed, but it turned out to be not playable on Magic Online because of so many clicks involved. But that was definitely one of the combos that looked like it might be almost there. So Tameshi plus Lotus Bloom, as we discussed at great length, you can do this as many times as you have a land to bounce. And the way that the successful version right now of Tameshi executes the combo is by playing Cultivator Colossus to put all of your lands back into play so you can keep going.
Yep.
But Ashaya lets you actually just use a creature instead of an actual land. Ashaya lets you bounce any 1-drop to satisfy the requirement of bouncing a land. So you can just kill them with Voldaren Epicure, just looping that with a Lotus Bloom and with Ashaya in play.
Any 1-drop is infinite mana, every 2-drop is infinite DBs.
Exactly. So once you start putting Ashaya into a deck, you start to see that it's actually sort of okay. It's not the worst card, although that build of Tameshi didn't end up becoming the dominant build, but it put Ashaya back on the map for me as an interesting and really unique effect.
So when I first saw this, I was like, 5 mana, it doesn't have an ETB, that kind of thing. This kind of fails all of the classic, is this modern playable checks. But do we kind of count turning your creatures into forests as an ETB? I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing. It happens as soon as it comes into play, so,
Yeah, more important than ETBs is just, does it affect the board
right.
the turn it comes into play? Essentially, an ETB is a proxy for that.
Sure.
And this is just, it's not an ETB, but it's the same concept where it comes in, a static effect, right? Just all creatures get -1/-1, just that is affecting the board. Krovax, Ascendant, Avatar, whatever his name is. But yeah, I think this counts for sure. Definitely comes in and it does things.
Everything is a Dryad Arbor.
Yeah, just kind of interesting. Non-token creatures you control are forest lands, but this doesn't. You still have to play the creatures, right? So it's not like your creatures become uncounterable because they're lands.
Correct. But Ashaya will come in counting as a land. So Chrism, who nominated this card, was talking about a landfall strategy that would essentially allow Ashaya to trigger something. If you had the landfall effect already in play, so if you had the Lotus Cobra down already, cast Ashaya, you get your mana back. I think that's definitely one of the right approaches.
Yeah, landfall's cool. I like this.
Yeah. I'll take any excuse to jam 4 Lotus Cobras in my deck. Let's go. I mean, turn 2 Lotus Cobra means turn 3 fetch, bring to light for Valky. This is something that's never left my mind. Turn 3 Valky is almost impossible for most decks to beat.
Alright, so sadly, the CEO and Mr. Combo himself had to leave because of life. I don't know. Some people just can't dedicate their whole lives to Magic. I don't know. Quite shocking.
Weird.
Sad news to find out. Weird people, right? But that leaves me alongside the awesome Brian to finish the remaining cards. So, Brian, what do we have next?
Next up, we have Mausoleum Secrets. Mausoleum Secrets is 1 and a black for an instant. It has Undergrowth. Search your library for a black card with mana value less than or equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. So this was nominated by First Turn Negator, and First Turn Negator writes, Henry Ford's famous quote, "You can have any color car you want so long as it's black," is incorrectly interpreted as about being the Model T. He actually said card, not car, and was talking about this instant speed demonic tutor. I'm up to my ears in strange brews with this card, but now I'd be excited to let the experts take a crack at it.
I remember seeing this card, like, I started playing not long before this, and the first, like, as soon as it was spoiled, the Shadow was still playing Street Wraith, and it was, like, the perfect way to find the shadows. It had, like, 2 weeks in the spotlight, and then just vanished into the other.
Yeah, tutors are incredibly powerful, so I'm kind of surprised this never saw more play. But, I think that as more and more sets come out, we're always focused on the new thing, and sometimes cards like this get, left in the dust a little bit. We pass them by, we forget about them, they end up in our bulk box, and, 4 or 5 years down the road, we find them again and realize, oh, this has been busted for a couple years because we got an influx of new cards that fit the bill or whatnot, right? So my first thought on this one is that maybe this could be a player in the fabled Mono Black Legends deck that Jiggy wants.
I mean, that could be a good idea. The biggest problem with this card is A, requiring a graveyard to look for anything that's not a 0.
Yep.
And B, always being a black card.
Yep.
Like, it has 2 powerful restrictions stapled to it, which is common for an instant speed tutor, right? A cheap instant speed tutor.
Alright, follow me on this. We play this card alongside Profane Tutor so that we can tutor up our Profane Tutor to tutor up the thing that we actually want, because we never actually had any creatures in the graveyard. I think I just broke it. Busted it wide open.
Wait, what? What? So, go again. We Profane Tutor for these so we can...
No. Other way around. We Mausoleum Secrets for the Profane Tutor so that we can tutor for the thing we actually want, because we never had creatures.
On turn 2 and turn 3, we spend it suspending our tutors for a turn 5 search.
Yeah.
Perfect. I love it. That's a goal. That's a goal. I mean, not ironically though, the first thing I thought when I just looked at it was like, what 0 mana black? Like, the first thing I went, like, wait, for 0 mana I can get like crashing, with 0 creatures I can get like crashing footfalls. And then it was like, no, black, more.
Yeah.
Black. Stick to it. Stick to the plan. Remember the plan. And I think, like, First Turn Negator, Soren already took it for a spin, got a 4-1 with their first take on a Shadows deck, as per usual. Like, the first brew being a Shadow makes a lot of sense. I'm just trying to picture what do I want to play it in. Like, some sort of mono black control with Force Rebirth and such seems like the best.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would be looking at probably, and this is a terrible idea, so nobody should ever do it, but Cabal Therapist and that sort of thing. A way to kill your own creatures and also kind of shred the opponent's hand if possible.
Just completely remove their hand. Okay, that could be fun. That's an interesting.
We just need
way.
Cabal Therapy in Modern. That's really.
We just need that, right? Like, that's what we need.
Yeah.
Of course it would be extremely balanced. Like, what could go wrong?
Actually, now that we have something like Grief, this actually does get a lot better, right? We're starting to get a density of cards that we can pitch to fill the graveyard up a little bit. So, Grief, you've got your Cyclers. Maybe this isn't actually that bad.
Yeah, now that we have cards like the Pitch Elementals, it really helps. Street Wraith plus Pitch Elementals really helps stack your graveyard, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey. All right, I'm in on this. Let's go.
We might have a plan after all.
Oh! But I have to take the next one. I know that I just did this one, but
no, it doesn't matter. Oh, okay, you can have. It's all yours, and I want the next one. So, like the other one, so better than ever.
So the next nomination is from Camberleaf, and it is for Painter's Servant. Painter's Servant is too generic for an artifact creature Scarecrow. As Painter's Servant enters the battlefield, choose a color. All cards that aren't on the battlefield, spells, and permanents are the chosen color in addition to their other colors, and it is a 1/3. Camberleaf writes, "Look here, lads. It gathers hues from the twilight mist so that its master can paint a better world. This wee fella got a lot of new toys from MH2 and beyond, pitch elementals, new protection creatures like sanctifiers, the March cycle, etc., which makes me believe there's some new painter brews out there. It lends itself to good cards. Just a matter of figuring out what the best color to name." Camberleaf, you are, this is a card after my own heart. This is my white whale of brewing. This is one of the few cards I've been entirely unable to justify purchasing because of the absolutely ridiculous price and lack of any real modern decks to play it in. I regret not buying it when it was still in the $20 range, but even that felt overpriced, and I am so hoping for a reprint in the new Double Masters, because this thing's like $75 at this point.
Really?
Yeah, it's insane. It's
I
insane.
didn't know that.
Yeah. It got reprinted with the Kaladesh Inventions, but that's, you're priced into a foil, and...
Yeah, it's not gonna reduce the pricing significantly, like, at all.
Yeah. And so Serum Visions actually did some Painters episodes, and we had tried some different things. I think my mind immediately goes to something like Indomitable Creativity into a Painter and Iona. That's a lock. Nobody gets to cast anything. But, Camberleaf is totally right. There's a whole lot of really cool new cards that have come out since then that we could do some really dirty stuff with. So I love this, and I hope this wins. Everybody should vote for it.
Or not. So what do we want to do especially? Like, what do you have in mind for this?
I mean, like I said, the initial thought is Indomitable Creativity into Painter and Iona.
Okay.
Just completely locks the game out. Nobody gets to cast spells. But, even just getting the ability to get some value, like this means, so if a Painter Servant is out and say you have a Solitude, if you name white, you can now pitch your lands to Solitude. And so, just as a value play with some of these, like in the late game, you're getting value out of lands in hand and things like that. So probably looking towards how can I make use of, a density of colored cards that I wouldn't otherwise have, like I have a bunch of colorless cards. Well, they now have a color. How do I make use of that?
Okay. So rather than combos, just extremely powerful synergies is what you mean.
Yeah.
Making main deck Pale of Summer plus main deck Sanctifier and hope that carries the game.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the sort of insanity we have in our minds.
Exactly, yep.
Okay. I dig it. Seems like the best way. And then we go to, I think, what might be the complete opposite regarding the value cards, right? Going straight into value. With our next choice, which is Skybind. So Skybind is a 5-mana enchantment with Constellation, which reads, whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield, exile target non-enchantment permanent and return it to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. JMS McLaren writes, Skybind is 5 mana, so it must be a good card. We got a lot new and cool enchantments with MH2 and Kamigawa. I think this card needs a chance. Just think of all the TVs and Yorion. I think I was being called out. It was meant for me to read that. So, the other day I just went ahead and asked the question that mattered. How does Skybind plus Yorion and a few enchantments work? So you can actually semi-lock your opponent out of the game if you have enough enchantments with Yorion. Because they return on the end step, you exile all your opponent's lands plus your Yorion. And you just don't allow your opponent to never have lands on their turn.
Yeah. I mean, they'll get their land drop for the turn, right? And that's it. Yep.
David keeps sending weird Skybind lists every few months, but we never see them. He keeps talking about his Skybind list, but we have never saw them. They just exist in the ether of his mind. We don't know what they are, but David keeps mentioning them.
That seems very promising. If David has some ideas kicking around in there, then there's probably some legs to this card.
Maybe there's something we can do. So Skybind is, the biggest problem with this card is the fact when you're casting it, you're paying 5 mana for a blink, right?
Right.
5 mana sorcery blink, so you better do something pretty amazing the next turn with it. You need some amazing ETBs on stuff, followed by really, really good ways to exploit them.
Right. Well, and that, yeah. So in the scenario that you had been talking about earlier about locking out the opponent, you have to have a Urion. right? Like, you're only
Yeah.
getting that the turn that you get the Urian blink, unless you're able to then blink your Urian later.
I mean, you're always
like,
linking the Urian again with the same Skybind triggers.
right. But you have to have the Urian first. Like, this all starts with, Skybind, then a Urian. The other thing is you need to have enough constellation triggers to get all of their lands.
Yeah.
So, we're probably turn 4, turn 5, turn 6 maybe, where this is...
Yeah, it has... You end up with a lot of requirements, right? You need a lot of enchantments, you need a lot of non-enchantment DTVs, and then you need a way to exploit that.
So I like where your head's at. This is crazy enough that it just might not work. I mean, just might work, definitely didn't... No, this is the kind of like Rube Goldberg machine I would definitely lose a lot of tickets trying to play, but it makes me wonder, why aren't we just playing Upheaval at that point,
If you're gonna do that stuff, why not just go all in on the crazy stuff, right? That's what you mean?
Yep.
I mean, maybe let's just play Upheaval. Or, if the plan is bouncing stuff, maybe just go with the exact next suggestion. Boomerang.
Ah, yeah.
So, Darshik writes, quite simply, so Boomerang, for anyone that doesn't know it, double blue, instant, return target permanent to its owner's hand. And Darshik writes, in the simplest letter we got today, who doesn't love bouncing lands? Simple, to the point, elegant.
Darshik, you're a player after my own heart. This was a card that caught my attention early on in my Magic career and is something that I often return to when I'm in blue focus lists, because it is a really nice catch-all answer for permanence if you can support the pips. I could see mixing this with something that copies spells, get some nice 2-for-1s. I don't know. Isochron Scepter, I'm not really sure here what we want to do with it. Isochron Scepter is probably not a great idea, but...
I don't think Isochron Scepter is good enough.
Isochron Scepter Zerda.
Okay, now you can talk a bit into me. No, the last time I played Isochron Scepter, I did so poorly. I never want to do that again.
That's fair. I mean, Boomerang's a sweet card, but it is one of those cards that's so wide open, I'm not even sure where to begin. I think lands are kind of level 0. This is where we start, is like, let's bounce lands, but can we get crazier? Can we get weirder?
How insane can we go?
Maybe this is part of, my fabled Wayward Guide Beast build, where I am actively looking to bounce my own lands, and so to get 8 of that effect, I'm casting Boomerang on my own stuff, in addition to using the Guide Beast to bounce my own lands. So this is what happens when the CEO and Dr. Combo leave.
We just go deep into Guide Beast plus Boomerang, and all we want is bounce our own lands. Like, we don't Boomerang our opponent's stuff, no. We out the Boomerang.
Well, you need to reset your Urza Saga and stuff like that. I'm trying here.
I mean, Boomerang is a simple card, but it's an elegant card. A time from a different era, a more sophisticated weapon from a different era.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, also a few years ago, like a year ago, when the Faithless Brewing cast did a ballot, it seemed like this card got 3rd, just behind Heartless Summoning a Witch's Courage. So it's not the first time it has popped up into the Brewers' hearts.
Yeah.
So maybe it's time for its time in the spotlight finally after going 3rd.
Yeah.
And then we have sadly a Shiggy's favorite. We have Shiggy's card actually, because Shiggy can't handle not voting. Do you want to take Dr. Combo's choice?
Sure. So Dr. Combo has nominated the Reality Chip. Reality Chip is 1 and a blue for a legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish, and it reads, you may look at the top card of your library at any time. As long as the Reality Chip is attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. It has Reconfigure for 2 and a blue. And a reminder, Reconfigure is pay the reconfigure cost attached to target creature you control or unattached from a creature. Reconfigure only as a sorcery. While attached, this isn't a creature. And the jellyfish is an 0/4.
I just love the line, legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so much.
It is. It's a lot. But, so first, Jiggy writes, sadly, Breach was not the home, but I still think it's underexplored, only seeing use in UW Hammer. I want to mess with Turbo Urza nonsense. And yeah, I think he's totally right. Like, you got Future Sight on an equipment creature thing. It's a legend, which works with Mox Amber. there's a lot to love about this card. So yeah.
I think it's like the card hasn't found a home besides sometimes in like those Esper or Azorius hammer shells. Like those are the only places where I see it with some community. I just love the card, and I hope we can, if it wins, we can find it a decent home because the card is so much fun,
Yeah, we talked about it a good bit on one of the most recent Serum Visions episodes, which I guess is not that recent these days since we haven't been recording well.
I don't know how recent that can be.
Yeah, well, sorry, one of the last episodes that we had done. And, we talked a lot about different ways to abuse this, and I think that the upsides on this card are that it ceases to be a creature when it's equipped. You can use things like Sigarda's Aid or some of the other free equip abilities, like Pure Steel Paladin, and you get to equip it for free, so you don't have to pay that reconfigure cost. And for anybody who has played with a Future Sight before, like, that card is worth the mana that you pay for it. It is an insane effect. Even just being able to see the top of your library is already huge, and then being able to cast off the top of your library is just like such a sweet feeling.
I mean, the best part about it, I have lost so many games in the past few months to like my hammer type opponent just going main might hammer Cigarra side off the top, and I'm just being like, okay.
Yeah, oh yeah. So I mean, I think that there's got to be something here. I don't know what that something is. Definitely would want to play it with ways to protect artifacts. One of the downfalls of these types of decks tends to be artifact destruction in mass, which, with Hammer being on top for as long as it had been, I think people are like well
ready
aware
with that.
of. Yeah, exactly. If it's not in the sideboard today, it'll be there as soon as they know that you're playing a deck that's, playing a reality chip or something like that. So
I agree completely. Like, they're gonna face it, and you gotta be ready for this. So before we jump into our last card, let us remind everybody the idea with these cards is that people get the chance to vote. All our patrons will get a chance to vote for anybody that isn't here usually or was here during the last project. All our patrons get the chance to vote on these cards, what they love, and in around a week, I think, has put down on the final time. And we will choose the one that has the most votes and spend a whole month going to the iterative Brewing with it alongside Serum Visions gang, because we have 2 experts here among us. Well, only one now. The other had to leave. But yeah, with that being said, we can jump right into our last card, which is Toluz Clever Conductor. I hate this mana cost so much. Toluz Clever Conductor. A white or a blue, and a blue or a black, so either triple blue or Esper colors for a 3-mana 3/1 legendary creature human rogue. When it enters the battlefield, it connives, the new mechanic from Streets of New Capenna, which causes you to draw a card, discard a card, and if what you discarded was a non-land card, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Additionally, whenever you discard one or more cards, they get exiled instead of discarded into the graveyard, and when Toluz dies, all those cards go straight into your hand. Pratima Undine writes, she reminds me of Tessa Thompson, and she's one of my favorite actresses. For anyone who doesn't know who Tessa is, she's the actress of Valkyrie in the Thor series, or the actress in the new Men in Black movies.
wasn't she also in
She's in a lot of places.
what's the Westworld? Was she in Westworld?
I'm not sure.
I think that's where I know her from.
Like, maybe you're right. I'm not completely sure. I haven't seen Westworld enough.
I'm terrible with celebrities, so
Don't worry, me too. Like that's why you say Westworld, and I'm like, maybe? I'm not gonna argue with it. If you say Westworld, I'm gonna be like, maybe you're right. So, what does this card provide? Like, what are we looking for in this card? Got anything you love about it? What do you build with it, Brian?
Yeah, I feel like if I was gonna play this, I would want to start doing things like Raven's Crime, or not Raven's Crime. I want a symmetrical discard effect.
Okay.
Right, like I want to force the opponent to discard. I also want to discard, and this breaks the symmetry on that.
Yeah.
It is also a rogue, and it is a human. So shout out to the party deck. Shout out to the fact that this could be played in humans, although humans isn't really discarding. Although humans does usually want some card draw or some velocity. I don't know that this is good enough because it's in the 3 slot. 3 slots is usually pretty clogged for them, and this is a looting effect, so not exactly what they're looking for.
Not the best.
Yeah. I don't know. This is a weird one because the types of decks that I would want to play this in, I think, tend to be non-creature decks, right? Like I want to be, like I said, doing symmetrical discard. So maybe looking for creatures that do that have that sort of effect. Maybe you play with the pitch elementals, except that it exiles from hand.
Yeah, exactly. Like, are you sure you want that with pitch elementals? That's when you start getting like, are you sure I want this? I don't know where I want this card. Like, it's interesting.
Well, it goes with, something like a Routing Regisaur.
Okay.
It goes with something, anything that has as an additional cost, discard a card. Now we're starting to, like, turn those cards around and make them, like any card that's asking you to discard as an additional cost is usually worth that cost, at least if it's a playable card. And, now we're starting to get some value back from that. So
there's also the fact that if it doesn't die to ETB, it's automatically like a 2-for-1.
Yep.
Like, you just gotta make sure it doesn't die to its own ETB immediately. I don't know, I'm quite intrigued by this card, in a good way.
It's a card that could be in a mono blue deck, but when I look at this card, I just think black. It's going to be in a black deck. I don't know that I would probably lean Dimir. Maybe I would go all the way into Esper. Actually, could be good with Dakon. I really like Dakon.
Dakon, the Esper one? The new Esper playing. Okay.
Yeah, because he surveils too, and so he's also filling up your graveyard a little bit. These don't exactly play together in the way that you're going to get the card advantage back, but if you're trying to, I don't know, I guess that doesn't work. Yeah. This is weird.
I don't know. It's a weird card because it's a creature and an effect. You don't tend to look on non-creatures, right? Like, looting effects are not exactly what you're looking for. And it's gonna be a 3-1 or 4-2 that on ETB loots a card, and when it dies, it's gonna net you a card. And also the cards you want to play this in a deck that wants looting effects, but don't want the cards in the graveyard. And I think that's a weird card.
Right, yeah.
Because those feels like borderline opposites. Yeah. Like, when do I want to loot, but I don't want cards in my graveyard? Does that ever happen? I think that's where it gets all boggly.
Maybe this is like sort of a role player in something where you want access to the cards that you're looting and you don't want to get blown out by graveyard hate. Right. Okay. Because this is a replacement. It's a trigger too. Oof.
No, it's a I don't know. It's such a weird card in its own design, right? Like, we're just suffering because of the design itself.
Yeah, if this was a replacement effect, I would say this is great because now your opponent's Dothy Voidwalker, you can exile into to lose as opposed to your opponent's exile effect, your opponent's replacement effect. But because this is a trigger, the replacement effect.
It's strange.
Yeah.
It just becomes strange. Everything becomes so weird with it. I don't know where I want this.
No, this is probably the biggest head scratcher I think that we've seen. Like, it's a very straightforward card in what it does, but I'm not sure where I want it.
Yeah, exactly. I have that exact same issue. Like, I think I want it, I'm just not sure where.
I mean, we've seen this before or something similar in like a Bag of Holding, right? Not exactly the same. But
sort of that effect where we're like, maybe I want this, I'm just not sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say nobody vote for this one.
Yeah, because I'm not sure where we're going if we're going with this.
So now we know everybody's going to vote for this one to make us suffer.
Just to make us suffer for a bit, exactly. Because if we don't suffer, what's the fun? Right? Like, what are people here for if we're not going to suffer a bit?
Well, you know what? I would happily try and brew with this. I love Esper colors.
I mean, we're complaining, but we both know we would brew with this if it's what if it's what wins.
If it's what the people want.
We're gonna submit to what people want. So if people want this, we're gonna take the punishment for you guys. That's our oath. I think that's all for us tonight, right?
Yeah, I think that's it. Just everybody keep an eye out for the voting form. I'm sure Dan will get that out. Pretty soon here. Make sure you do your civic duty and vote, and may the best card win.
Exactly. Ryan, as always, a pleasure being with you here.
Yeah. This has been fun.
Always. Hope you have a nice day, and see everybody. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
That's a wrap on this edition of the Faithless Brewing Podcast. If you would like to vote on the next card for our monthly project, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/faithlessbrewing, where a pledge at any tier will get you a Discord access as well as other cool rewards. Come join our community and make your voice heard. And tune in next time when we join the Riveteers and do our best to dun them out. That's all for today. Stay safe and we'll see you next time.